Okay, good morning, everyone. I make that 10 o'clock. We've got very high numbers today, a fair bit to get through, so we'll make a prompt start. Welcome, good morning, and thank you for taking the time out to join us today as we introduce the 2022 FFT and GL Assessment GCSE Estimate Service for secondary schools. We've done this for the last couple of years. It's been hugely successful, great feedback from schools. And we've built upon that service, extended it this year, and we'll talk a bit more about that through the session today. Introduce myself, Craig Whitlam, Head of Product here at FFT. I'm joined today by two of our product managers, Sean Green and Stephen Turp, and also from GL Assessment, Director of Education, Crispin Chatterton. It's great to be working with our friends at GL again, extending this service, and hopefully you'll get the benefits out of using this as we move forward. So just for your information, you'll have heard the recording going off. We are recording the session. There's lots of interest in the sessions afterwards. Lots of people can't make it for all those reasons I'm sure you're aware of when you get dragged away in school. So we will have this recording available after the session. None of your images or your names will be captured. Obviously our images will be as we're presenting. We've muted all microphones. But please do use the chat facility and direct any questions you may have to FFT Sean. So if you see in the chat there, if you find FFT Sean and send any questions through to Sean, we will take those at the end of the session. Please don't make notes. We will get the slides out to you after as well. And if you do have any specific questions about your school, please don't use the chat facility for those. If there's any specific questions around your school or your data, please get those sent through to support at FFT, or you can see the phone number down there at the bottom of the slide as well. So the agenda, what we wanted to do is just really set the scene, give you some information around that current year 7 cohort. Obviously the SATs returned this year, so let's have a look at the performance information. How has performance in primary schools been impacted by the pandemic over the last couple of years? We'll then look at attendance and performance as well. We've got colleagues joining us from around the country today, so you'll see some information around specific regions, which will obviously resonate with yourselves. And we'll look at the attendance for other year groups as well. We know attendance has had a huge impact, obviously, during the pandemic, and that can be regional as well. Different pupil groups have been impacted in different ways, so we'll talk a bit about that. I'll then hand over to Crispin, who will talk to you about getting the most out of your CAT4 tests. We'll then have a live demo. Stephen will take us through the system, show you how to get data into the system, and you'll probably be aware we launched our new target setting and new homepage for FFT last week, so we'll have a look at that as well. A bit of a refresher on that as well, looking through the different reports and then looking at the different estimate models within there as well. And a key thing there you'll see in the blue circle is we've expanded it this year. It's all year groups that you can add CAT4 data, not just year 7 and year 8, and instant estimates. You upload it and within a matter of seconds you will get your estimates through into the system. Upload your CAT4 data and your estimates will be available. So just thinking back to performance in 2019, pre-pandemic, we're looking at the percentage of pupils reaching the expected standard in reading, writing and maths in primary schools in the Key Stage 2 SATs. So 65% of pupils prior to the pandemic achieved expected standard in reading, writing and maths. But you can see there was a dip in performance as we would have expected due to the pandemic, and that was down to 58% on the 2022 SATs. What does that mean regionally? So you'll see the data for 2019. This will be relevant to yourselves, thinking about where you're based, and then we can look at the impact by different regions across the country, and you can see there, obviously the data coming through. Lower across all regions, but you will see some impacted more so than others. Was it just particular subjects? So let's have a look at the breakdown by those separate subjects. Were subjects impacted in different ways? I think as you can expect, reading probably the least so, impacted very, very similar in terms of the greater depth in the pink colour there and the expected standard in the green colour there. What was it like for writing? Obviously, you can see a big hit on writing across both greater depth and expected standard, and you can see similar with maths as well. And therefore, that meant that big impact across reading, writing, maths combined in 2022, as we would have expected. Looking at the mean scaled score, looking at it for England as a whole, and then looking across the different regions as well. 2019 data is the blue circles there, and we'll overlay that with the 2022 data to see the impact across all the different regions across England. England as a whole, minus 1.3 in terms of the scaled score for maths, the difference, so big impact there, as you can see. But other regions impacted in different ways as well, some less so than others. You could look there at London, for example, and the East Midlands, less impacted than others. And the North East at the top there, minus 1.5. Important to look at that and put it in the context around pupil learning as well. So on average, the maths scale score 1.3 across the country, lower in 2022, and that's the equivalent to around 2 to 3 months of progress for an 11-year-old. If you overlay that with the attendance as well, what about the different absence rates? So across the country, 7.1%. But what about different regions? We talked about London, the East Midlands there. Obviously, we can see that they were lower in terms of the national average, 6.2 and 6.8%. But you can see the different percentages there, absent rates across the country. And we know, obviously, we talked about this last year, absence does have a big impact on the performance of pupils. Just looking at that test performance, so looking at reading here, we've looked at the 2022 data in the pink and the 2019 data in the blue colour there. And what you're looking at here is the cumulative percentage of pupils by Key Stage 2 reading. So right down the bottom left, you can see the percentage of pupils that were hitting a scaled score of 120, right to the far end where the scaled score, the pre-Key Stage scaled score equivalents of 64. What we wanted to focus on was that sort of middle range there. So actually performance for that middle range in reading was actually higher for the middle range of pupils there than it was in 2019. But you see the specific ends there where you can see they are very similar. And that makes sense when we look at the reading data being very similar for 2019 and 2022. That's different for maths. Looking at maths, we saw the overall data, and maths, it flips. You know, the extremes are quite close again. But looking in the middle ranges there's quite a big difference for those pupils in between those top scaled scores and bottom scaled scores in maths. And then finally, just thinking about other cohorts as well, we've looked at the year 7 cohort, those that have come in this year from primary schools. We've looked at their performance, we've overlaid that with the attendance as well. But looking at those other year groups as well, what we're looking at here is the percentage of sessions missed by pupils. And then we're breaking that down by the percentage of pupils in the different year groups. And if you look at current year 11, obviously on the slide, you can see it's year 10 because this data is from last year, but that's your current year 11 cohorts. And you can see 36% of pupils missed 10% plus of sessions. That's a huge amount that's missed. And you can see the biggest impact is that current year 11, and the impact is lower for year 10, year 9, and current year 8 as well. But you can see lots of absence due to the pandemic during the last academic year. And if you think back to what we talked about last year, we know even a small percentage difference in absence rates can have a huge impact on performance. So it's just really setting the scene there around what we know around these current cohorts. Hopefully that's useful to set the scene. I'm going to hand over now to Crispin from GL Assessment, who's going to talk you through getting the most out of your CAT4 data. Over to you, Crispin.
Thanks very much, Craig. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here and working again with our friends at FFT. I'm Crispin Chatterton, Director of Education here at GL, which effectively means I look after all of our assessments and our products and services. So 100 years ago, 2 young boys called Luis Alvarez and William Shockley were sat in an exam hall in California sitting an IQ test. And the reason they were sitting the IQ test is that an ambitious young psychologist called Lewis Terman from Stanford was launching a first of its kind study. And what he was trying to do was to identify the most talented young people in California, and to then track them over time and see how they did in their academic and then on into their careers. So in order to identify the young people to be involved in that cohort study, he had them sit an IQ test. And so this is what Alvarez and Shockley was sitting on that day. The cutoff mark in order to be included in that genius cohort that was going to be tracked over time was a score of 135. So they needed to get 135 in order to be involved in term and study. Now, sadly for Alvarez and Shockley, neither of them managed to get that score. So neither of them were included in that cohort of young geniuses who were tracked over time. But interestingly, both Alvarez and Shockley went on to study physics. Both Alvarez and Shockley went on to get PhDs. And both Alvarez and Shockley went on to win the Nobel Prize for Physics. So it does make you wonder, well, what went wrong? Clearly, by anybody's standards, these are two young geniuses who should have been picked out by that test, but they were completely missed. Why did that happen? The reason, of course, was the test that they sat and what it was testing. So in common with many sort of IQ tests or tests of ability, these tests focused on mathematical and verbal ability. What they missed was what Alvarez and Shockley had in spades, which was spatial ability. Spatial ability is consistently under-identified as a strength in the population, and yet 7% of people are particularly spatially able. So that's a whole swathe of people whose strength we are potentially missing. And one of the things that I get really excited about and passionate about in the CAT4 test is that we include spatial ability, a measure of spatial ability in that assessment, and uniquely we have it as a standalone element or battery in the test, so that we can understand pupils' spatial ability and make sure that we're catering for that ability and developing them so that we don't miss the Alvarezes and the Shockleys who've got the potential to go on to great things. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about sort of more widely what you can get out of CAT4, as well as what you can get that we use with the fantastic FFT service. So briefly, YGL, many of you will know us. For those who don't, we're a world leader in the provision of high quality assessments and data analytics for schools. Our mission, I guess, is to help every child realize their potential by trying to give teachers a whole pupil view of that student, so that we look at the whole rounded picture of that student rather than just one focus. We're very proud of our research. We partner with a number of organizations, EEF, NFER, UCL, other universities around the world. We partner with a lot of the opportunity areas in the UK as well on research, as well, of course, as with FFT. So we're very invested in our research. We operate around the world, and we've been doing so for 40 years. We have a real focus on support for the schools who we partner with. So we have a whole team here. I'm in our office here in Brentford. We have a whole team here who are ex-teachers whose job is to help schools to get the most out of their CAT4 data. So if you're using CAT4, you don't think you're getting the most out of it, please do get in touch, because we have a whole bunch of people who've been using CAT4 themselves in schools who are just itching to talk to you about how to get the most out of it. So on that, why use CAT4? It's very widely used. We sat over 1 million assessments in 2021-22. It's rigorously standardized on a population of just under 25,000 pupils. And then our indicators, so the key stage 2 indicators that you'll be looking at for FFT and our GCSE indicators, are verified every year to make sure that they're still correct. And we have a very high level of reliability. So 0.96 is really the gold standard in terms of reliability for a test. Crucially also, that's the reliability for CAT4 overall, but each of the individual batteries of CAT4, including that spatial battery, also has very high reliability. Thanks, Craig. So what does CAT4 assess? Many of you will be aware of this, but just so that everybody's clear. So we look at verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, non-verbal and spatial. And we look in particular actually at the balance between spatial and verbal reasoning. And that's a really interesting element to drill into in your reports, and we'll see one in just a second. Because that can allow you to see if a child is weaker in their verbal reasoning and stronger in their spatial reasoning. That might be a child who's struggling to access the curriculum because of their verbal ability, but actually is really spatially able and should be excelling in maths and science and those areas that spatial ability really play into. So what do you get out of the report? So first of all, retrospective key stage 2 indicators. So when you have students coming into your school in year 7 and they sit CAT4, we have a correlation between the CAT4 outcome and what we would expect them to have got at key stage 2. So that gives you that option to put that into the FFT service. It gives you the option to look at your SATs results alongside what CAT4 is giving you in terms of key stage 2 indicators, and giving you a deeper understanding of perhaps where that cohort is as they come into your school. We also have the individual reports for students, and this is the one, if you haven't looked at an individual report for a student, please just dive into one, pick a student you're particularly interested in, and go in and have a look, because this is where you'll get that detailed information on their strengths and weaknesses, and the sort of narrative about how you can support a student with that profile. So do have a look at those. And then you have the group report that's going to help you look at your cohort of students, that incoming cohort of students, and look at how does ability look like across that group. Have you got particular biases that you need to be looking at? So that's really helpful in terms of that incoming year 7 cohort. So that's a snapshot of CAT4. As I say, if you use CAT4, you think you could get more out of it, please do get in touch with our team. What else do we do? So just a couple of things to point out. The first one is that if you're using CAT4, you can unlock a load more power by bringing in other assessments there. So CAT4 can help you understand then, is there a gap between where your students are attaining right now and where their potential is? And are there particular students where that gap is kind of shouting out for you to support those students? So using CAT4 with other assessments will allow you to identify those students who maybe aren't achieving in line with their potential. I also just want to do a quick plug for our recently released GL data dashboard. So this will appear in your TestWise account. So if you're a current GL customer, and if you use CAT4 and another assessment, this only applies if you've got more than one assessment, we've launched some dashboards that effectively allow you to see all of your CAT4 data at a school, cohort and individual student level in one view on one dashboard. It's completely free. We've just added that into your service. So if you haven't seen that yet, go into TestWise. You'll see a button for the GL data dashboard. Do dive in and have a look. And again, if you go in there and you're not quite sure where to go, get in touch. We've got lots of people here who are looking forward to help you with that. And that's just a snapshot of that. I won't dive into this in detail now, just for the sake of time, but that's what's now available to you. Great. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity just to talk you through that. I'll leave you with this lovely quote from Andrew Daly at the Meridian Academies Trust, and hand back over to Craig. Thanks, Craig.
Great. Thank you, Crispin. So it's great to sort of set the scene, get some detail around the tests, think about the pupil cohorts, the absence rates. But what we're coming to now is the nuts and bolts of getting the data in. You've got your CAT4 assessments. How do you get them into the new system? And how quickly can we turn that around? And then let's have a look at those reports and let's look at those different estimate models within the report. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's been very brave and taking on the responsibility of a live demo using our system today. That's over to you then, Stephen.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you to Crispin as well. So good morning, everybody, and really good to be with you here today to give you, as Craig says, the scary bit, our live demonstration of the system. This is our demo school. So with the data you're seeing is fictitious. The children are fictitious on the screen, but it just gives you an insight to a much more enhanced and slimmed down process to compare to what we produced in the last 2 or 3 years of this joint project with our partners at GL. If you did miss our launch last week, it is online. You can go and still view it. But this is our first phase of the new iteration, the new enhanced system, the new enhanced Aspire system. And this is the home module, as we call it. This is where you go to, this is where you land. And just a quick refresher, or indeed, if you didn't see the session last week, just a quick update of what's on the system. The system is now live in terms of it is linked to your MIS system. And that's a really big step forward. So no longer are we waiting for census returns, and that can be several weeks or indeed months or sometimes terms behind. This is a live overnight link to your MIS, to up-to-date pupils' names, details, and indeed their context. This home module is made up of tiles, as we refer to them. So there's an attendance tile here, which you can see is around our schools, fully interactive. We can look at attendance data and all of that. To the side of that is our target setting. These are designed, these tiles, to be little windows, little signposts into the data. So it's sort of a tantalizing taste, if you will, of the data, what's there behind all of this, a quick look at a window in to what's going on behind all that. Third and fourth tiles, our FFT services. The system is now very aware of your subscription and also aware of your privileges. So if you're an administrator, you will get a different set of information to somebody who is a main user of the system. And then finally, shortcuts to other areas of Aspire, some in our original Aspire product, but others to the new area. Also, a big link, as you've heard Craig talk about in the introduction, to what our research arm, Education Data Lab, are doing. You'll also notice that the menu has changed position, so no longer across the top of the screen. It's now a menu which expands, which opens up. It's at the side of the screen, so we can get to these areas either from a tile, or if that doesn't exist, actually from the menu here, from the drop-down menu here, in that way. And if you are an administrator, you will have this additional feature here, as I mentioned, which is one of the ways that data can be exported out. And it's been a popular question in the last week or two. It's a very popular question at the last webinar on Tuesday. How do I get our data out so that I can manipulate it in Excel? Well, the administration function there is the way into that. This menu is collapsible. So if you want to increase your real estate, if you want to see more of your data on the screen, then just collapse that menu out of the way in that area. To actually get to our results service and how to take part, well, our results service is accessed from on the side menu, from the results service option here, and we're looking at the 2022-23 Key Stage 4 estimate service. Remind you, as I've just said, you do need to be the administrator of the system to get access to this part of the product. Now, this area here should be familiar to many of you. So those of you that took part in our early results services, GCSE results services back in the summer, back in August, will be familiar with this file exchange. It's a sort of a universal module that FFT is using now for any secure transfer of data between yourselves and us. So you'll see this coming through in various guises in the future. Now, this particular service, the CAT4 service, does come with full guidance documents, and I would really urge you to download, to view that document. Perhaps it's not you, perhaps it's another colleague in school that will be taking part in the service. It does take you through a step-by-step guide of how to download and submit your CAT4 data to us. So I would urge that as a read. It's got some FAQs at the back, which are, again, always a good look before you pick up the phone or send us an email for questions. Over here, we have the area where we're going to manage our files. And then here you can see your history. Now, this is our demo school. You can see I practiced it this morning at 9:18 just to make sure it was all working. So there we've got a history there. I can delete them. I can extract the files back again so that I might want to make some amendments in that way. You'll also notice some really significant changes. So you may remember that we worked on Windows for 1 year group at a time in previous iterations of this service. This year, we have changed that. So now you're able to submit CAT4 test data for all year groups 7 through to 11. Now, actually, year 10 has been very popular with schools where colleagues are saying, well, year 10 do have SATs, but we are starting GCSEs or GCSEs have just started. Actually, we also administer a CAT test with year 10s as well. And also, not only can you change the year groups, you can also change the test that you are submitting. So if you've got some year 10s currently, but they did their test back in year 9, so level F, or year 8, the recommended E, then you can submit that historical data as well. And I think that's a big change, again, from previous years. I'm going to stay with year 10. I'm going to go for G, which is the recommended level for year 10. Simple process of downloading the Excel file, which will contain all of the latest data. And remind you that the latest data would have been extracted yesterday. It's overnight process from your MIS, pupils' names, their context details, SEND, FSM6, etc., from your MIS. So do ensure your MIS is up to date, as I say, because that is where we will be receiving that data. Now, in best Blue Peter tradition, I do have one already saved. So I hope that this will work. And my colleagues will tell me if they can't see my screen. But I'm seeing some nods there. So I downloaded this earlier on to get this out for you. So you can see here's our template, my children's names, details, UPNs, test level, year group level, gendered, month of birth, etc. are all there. And then places the 4 columns for you to either cut and paste or manually enter the scores. And remind you, between 59 and 141 is the range from each of the batteries for our youngsters. So I'm just going to put some data in here. You see I've already put some in earlier on. Can't go to, can I? 30. Do another one there as well. You'll notice as I'm entering this data, you'll see in the far column there is a true appearing, and that's telling me that that's there at the moment is invalid because there's only 3 out of the 4 batteries that have actually been submitted. As soon as the 4th one goes in, then that disappears, and it's just a little check there that is the case. So all 4 batteries do need to be completed. We would say to schools not to amend this file. Please, don't add anything extra or indeed delete any columns, even though they may be superfluous to your need. There are lots of hidden columns here, and therefore that will obviously cause a problem. So I'm going to save that file, and then I'm going to go back into File Exchange. Again, hopefully this will show you the right screen, and I'm going to now upload that file that I've just saved. So there we go, there's my demo file. That is now been chosen, and I can upload this. Now that is now processing. So in my file upload history tile, just here, you can see the little amber sign there. Estimates are currently being generated using this file. The previous one, which I did earlier on this morning, as you can see, has now been overwritten. So that's gone grey. That tells me that those estimates are no longer, from that data, are no longer available, and it's been superseded by the one here in green. Now, it's, as you saw, I didn't time it. It certainly was less than a minute, probably less than 30 seconds even. So gone are those 2 weekly windows that you remember you uploaded, and then 2 weeks later estimates were available to you. We've streamlined it. We've made the process much more straightforward for colleagues to go to. So let's have a look at those targets for year 10. And this is now taking us to our new target setting module. So I could have accessed that from the home module, those tiles. I could have accessed this from the side panel here, but as it's on File Exchange, that is a great way to go in. So the system now will be bringing out from the MIS, from my MIS, all of the latest pupil information, my pupils' names, and joining this CAT4 together. So you can see it's marked here. So estimates are based on either Key Stage 2 or in this case, CAT4. And this is now the whole of the Key Stage. And that was a big ask from schools, several big asks around targets and estimates. Can I see it graphically on the screen? And indeed, as you can see, as I hover around, you can. Can I also see the pupil details underneath and go straight into target setting? Now, before I actually look at that year 10, just a couple of things. First of all, this is a multiple subjects report. This is the first iteration, the first phase of our new system. Craig will talk us through at the end about some of the things that are soon to arrive. I can show 3 subjects at a time. So I've chosen 3 English, language, literature, and maths. I could have chosen the 3 sciences or 3 humanities, entirely up to you. I've also chosen an indicator around grade 4. That's the default indicator, but you can see I could look at grade 5 and above, or indeed an average point score. The other big change is I can choose all from a drop down on the screen. I can choose my year group straight away. So let's go to my year 10s. Notice it's fully interactive. Notice the bar charts are changing as I'm taking pupils in and out of the system. And also a big ask, and certainly in my experience of spending most of my time with FFT working in training and visiting schools and talking to schools in small and large audiences, bringing through those teaching groups has been a really popular request, and indeed we've done that now. So these are obviously fictitious. You'll have other codes in your MIS for those different codes for your teaching groups. Equally, we have on the screen here the usual context filters that you'll be familiar with from FFT. So let's have a look at our year 10s. And there we are. There's our 4 pupils. You may remember that were uploaded from my extract. That's my upload. It will tell me over here the time. So that was this morning at 10:30, so 3 minutes ago. So that is the latest one. That is my, just double check, that is my latest one there. But also you'll notice I've got all of the tokens here, and as I say, which are drawn from your MIS from the night before. And all of these can be sorted. I can bring pupils to the top or the bottom in that way, as well as use those contextual filters as I just mentioned. So there's my 4 pupils. Of those 4 students in year 10, I have the average, the overall figure you can see in this very top row. Again, that's been something the schools have asked for. Obviously, as more and more students go in, I can look at that. So there's my estimates here. The most likely estimate in this report for English language, literature, and maths for each of these students, based on the history that we have, the history of pupil outcomes, as you know, FFT has a handle into, rather, I should say, but the ability to flick between the 2. So year 10 had Key Stage 2, and so there's my pupils with their scores from Key Stage 2 way back 4 years ago when they took year 6 SATs, and so I can very quickly compare and contrast estimates on those different inputs, those different prior attainment bands. Because we are using 2 inputs, or you can flick between 2 inputs, the little I indicator there under band will tell you how we have derived the H, M, and L, the higher, middle, and lower. This is a CAT4, so we are using the same methodology as GL does in terms of all GL reporting. We're using exactly the same. So the higher, middle, lower will match there. Obviously, if I change to Key Stage 2, it will be a different methodology in that way. So I have my details, I have my data, I have my estimates. What about target setting? Again, this was covered last week, but very quickly, I have the ability for my class. So this could be my teaching group, my English teaching group in year 10 as a class teacher. I can go in, and after the appropriate level of challenge down here has been chosen for my school, for my subject, I can go in and I can choose the appropriate target. With all of that knowledge that I have on these children, not only their prior attainment, but my internal knowledge, maybe practice papers that you've been doing with them, maybe information around their attendance, information around the behavior, or indeed all of that classwork that's been going on with them for the last year or so. So I can set them a target, and you'll notice as soon as that target is set, a difference column appears here, and you can see there that that brings up the numerical difference there between what FFT is the most likely outcome for this level of challenge compared to my target. Save button down the bottom there, as you can see, I won't save these, but the save button down the bottom there, but also the ability to flood fill. So if you do, in my teaching experience, 20 odd years in the classroom, I always taught in schools with ability groups. That's the way science was taught in my school. So I might say as a starting point for this ability group, I want to set everybody to a 4, and then I would just go in and I would change the odd 1 or 2 children, perhaps in conversation with my data lead, with my head of department, to actually set them a more realistic target in that way. So it's live, it's very interactive. As I've set targets, I didn't show you at the top of the screen there, as I've set targets, the columns have appeared in terms of targets coming through there, as I've got filters, I've got year groups, teaching groups, all of which will be, as I say, interactive on the screen. But I think the big key thing for me certainly is the instant way in which our estimates are produced, the way in which they can be compared to Key Stage 2 in the case of year 7 and year 10, who've got Key Stage 2, year 11, of course, we've got Key Stage 2 data, but also that it's live and linked directly to your MIS. Just a reminder what I said about getting the data out, and I know many questions have come in about, can I extract this into an Excel file that I can do work with? And yes, as an administrator going here, I won't share it with you now, but as an administrator, you can go into your data manager area and download that information into Excel. So thank you very much, Craig. I'll hand back to you in terms of next steps. If you do have any questions, can I ask you to send them on to my colleague Sean? Sean is answering questions, and he will be able to share those responses with us in a moment. Thank you, Craig.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Just before we bring Sean in with the questions, just a quick update, as Stephen mentioned, many of you, if you joined us last week for the launch of Aspire, the next generation Aspire, you'll know we talked about it being a living, breathing system. So I just wanted to update you that one of the big requests is around the probabilities of the different grades, whether that be through to 1 to 9. That is very much in development. I looked at it yesterday. I would say it's around about 90% there. So watch this space for that report coming out as well. So you'll get the single subject report where you can see those probabilities. There's more in development as well around pupil groups and different aggregations that we're working on. But as I say, it's a living, breathing system. It's being developed every single day, and more things will be added to it as well as time goes by. Sean, are you okay to join us and summarize some of the questions that have been coming through?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Craig. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. Right. Thank you for the questions that have coming through. As we'd expect with several hundred people on, there's been a lot. I imagine as I've been frantically responding to these questions, Stephen, Craig and Crispin have been answering them in their next slides. I apologize if I'm repeating something that you've seen, but I'll just try and summarize some of the key ones that have come through. We've had questions around the new estimate model for FFT. and will it retain the 50, 25 different options that we've had before throughout FFT, which it does. And again, as I said, apologies if that was something that went through. I was busy responding to questions. We've had questions around new starters. So if a school has a new starter, can they go in and just upload results for that new starter if they've got the rest of the cohort already filled in? That's something they can do, Craig?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you've got a new starter that arrives, say today, they're within your management information system today, then the following day, you'd be able to upload their data, add it to the cohort and see the new aggregations with that pupil, as well as their individual data as well.
Excellent. Some quick ones that I can fly through. Creating users. People are saying they want their heads of department to be involved, which is fantastic. You can create as many users as you wish within Aspire. Copies of slides will come out shortly after the presentation. Let me just go through others that I've written down. How long for the estimates? We do say up to 24 hours, but in most cases it's generally a few minutes at most, isn't it? From what we've seen, certainly from Stephen's demo that we saw earlier on.
It is very quick, and
Yeah.
the reason we've got the 24 hours in there is if every secondary school was hitting it at the same time, which is very unlikely, then it would put more pressure on the server, so it would take a bit longer to bring that data through. But typically, 30 seconds it was, I think, for Stevens there. Anything from 30 seconds to 2 or 3 minutes is the typical timescales.
I think this will have been covered. I think Stephen was talking about exports rather, but looking at the option to look at CAT4 and Key Stage 2 estimates next to each other. That's something that will come in exports in time, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you can't do that in the system side by side at the moment.
No.
But one of the things is we welcome the feedback, and if it's things that we can look at and bring that into the system, then there's things we can do. You can export at the moment, so you could export based on CAT4, you could export based on Key Stage 2, and then put them in the files and look alongside them with some lookups. But
which is what schools have done previously for quite some time. It's a very sort of common thing that schools have done. There are several questions coming in, so I'll probably come back to you, Craig. Crispin, if you're there, please, just a couple of questions specific to CAT4. One that we did have the other day about the recommended time period that it's done in. I know it's 3 45-minute tests, but schools are asking if it should be done on the same day or the same week, etc. Is it crucial that it adheres to a strict time period, or is it a bit of flexibility around there?
No, it's not. I mean, we'd say keep the time frame as tight as you can. But if it's over a couple of days, then that's fine.
Thank you. And just one more, please, Crispin. A question asking how often should schools do CAT4 tests?
So we recommend every couple of years. So we'd say in year 7 at transition, in year 9 to help with options. Those are the sort of two key for secondary, the two kind of key testing years. Yeah, some schools like test as kids are going to sixth form.
Of course.
The kind of the two key years are 7 and 9. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Right, just a few more questions that are coming through. So again, if I'm just going to ask people to jump in on these, let me just see which ones that we haven't covered. Let me see. Targets are currently on an Excel spreadsheet. Will there at some point be the facility to upload rather than input manually?
Yeah, it's something that we're looking at as well.
We're in the first version, aren't we?
Yeah, couple of things there. People are asking to be able to pre-fill the targets with the most likely FFT grade, whether that's 50, 20 or 5. That's currently being worked on in the system. And then the ability possibly to download a template, add your data into the template and re-upload that is something that we can look at for targets as well longer term.
Yeah, there's various questions around imports. Let me just see if anything else is coming through. A couple of questions around, we haven't touched on it, but availability of Key Stage 5 estimates for current Year 12 students and plans for that.
Yeah, not available as yet, but it's in our backlog. One thing around Key Stage 5 is we've received the data for Key Stage 5. That's not for the estimates, but we've recently received that from the DFE, so we'll turn that around and get that out as soon as we can. And then getting the Key Stage 5 reports available for estimates is on our list to do as well. So hopefully we can update after Christmas on when that'll be available.
And again, can you use different FFT options 50-25 for different students in the same cohort? That's as previously you can, can't you? You can obviously the estimates, you know your children far better than we do. You know your subjects and what the appropriate level of challenge is. So yes, that's something you can do. And I think that's it. There were quite a bit of a flurry coming in at the end, and I think that's it. I'll just look. This is again, I think a future development, Craig, but looking at other assessments that could be uploaded. You know, for example, schools uploading their own tracking information, but I'm guessing this is further down the line now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's at the forefront of what we're trying to do with the new system. The system is all about integration of data sets, and what we've got at the moment is that living and breathing data you get from the management information system. You're able to put your targets in, you're able to upload CAT4 data on a more regular basis and get those instant estimates. But the next bit is adding in that regular assessment data, whether that's a teacher assessment, whether it's a test that you may take from GL, one of their other tests, whether it's from other providers. We're looking at how we can get that into the system, but it's that's the key vision for the future, is integration of all those data sets, bringing in the attendance alongside pupils as well, but just bringing it all together so you get that full holistic view around a pupil, and therefore, you know, aggregating up from a pupil to those subject groups that you saw up to year groups and the whole key stage as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Sean, I've just had a question just come through on chat. So are we able to do CAT for this term for years 7, 8 and 9 and then upload to FFT? Which, yes, you definitely can. That's now available in the new service. Do they have to be done with year 7 to work with FFT? No. So you can test your year 8s and your year 9s, I'm right in saying, Craig, I think, and use that data to generate your estimates.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. It's extended for all year groups now, and if there's particular pupils that come in that you want to add data for, that's absolutely fine as well. And
just to acknowledge one other direct message I have, which we didn't address as a question. One was, do you have the Key Stage 2 retrospective indicators at all levels of CAT4? We don't. They're currently in level D, which is that transition stage. But really interested to hear from you. I've heard from Laura that would be really useful for her. We'd love to hear from you if that's something you would want as well.
Excellent, thank you, Craig. Stephen, any more questions that have come into you? I know that most have come into me, but they do seem to have dispersed amongst a few of us this morning. So I don't know if any more questions have come in.
I've had some questions, Sean. I'm answering them directly. Lots of questions about year 12 and also about A8, P8, those sorts of areas, but I'm answering those questions individually. Thank you.
Right, okay, and there's a few people again I've asked for contact details, and we'll get our support team to get back to you. So thank you for attending. Fantastic that we have several hundred people spending 45 minutes with us on a Thursday morning to come and hear about the new estimate service, and hopefully it's something that you wish to participate in. We've put our contact details there for ourselves and for GL assessment. Please do get in touch with us and GL if there's anything at all that we can help with. I've just had a question coming in through another online webinar that was mentioned. Yeah, it's just a link. We did another one earlier in the week. It's the same webinar that you've just seen today, but we will send a copy of the webinars out. Whilst we're talking about webinars, a quick plug: we have 2 attendance webinars next week, on Tuesday at 2 o'clock and Thursday at 10 o'clock, both the same webinar, just repeated twice. So if you wish to come along, Jen, please find that in Eventbrite, and that's going out in the attendance communications that are going out later today. It will be great to see you at that. It's been great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found it useful. I think as we're on the 1st of December, we can broach it and say Merry Christmas now. So have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to working with you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.